So if there's one thing that Donald Trump can't stand to be considered, it's a loser, which is ironic because politically speaking, in many respects, he is, at least in regards to modern history. So he lost the popular vote twice. He's the first president in 35 years and fourth in a century to lose re-election. He lost the House and the Senate in 2020, and according to many political experts, some of whom are conservative, he's the primary reason that so-called red wave didn't manifest in 2022 and was more of a red spritz. Now, if you ask Trump, he'll try to spin and say that his win-loss record with respect to endorsements is actually pretty pristine, that the people who won were people that he hand-selected and endorsed, and the people who lost didn't earn his endorsement because they were disloyal. But if you actually look at the numbers, they tell a different story. Now, I will say that the conventional Beltway wisdom is that the leader of a particular political party, especially during an election cycle, is the de facto kingmaker of that party, which again, on paper, would make sense, right? Because they're the leader of the party, so you figure their endorsement of a particular candidate would curry quite a bit of favor with the electorate. This election cycle was a bit of a referendum on that in terms of both parties, right? So Democrats had plenty of time to prepare for this because the leader of the Democratic Party, President Joe Biden, has been unpopular for about a year, right? And poll after poll after poll have reaffirmed that. So Democrats and Democratic strategists were able to prepare accordingly. Democratic candidates who were uniquely vulnerable distanced themselves strategically from the president. The president didn't campaign with many Democratic candidates because he was seen as a liability electorally. But the interesting thing is with the GOP, because the GOP has been seen, by myself included, as a cult of personality surrounding Donald Trump, that they have forfeited their principles and their policy prescriptions for this cult of personality, where they're just completely devoted to Trump. And leading into the election, it looked like it was going to play out that way. That even after the revelations of, the January 6th Select Committee, one hearing after another, Trump stayed relatively popular with the GOP. But as the results came in November for this 2022 midterm, we saw a bit of a different story. And it's interesting when you look at the numbers. Now, I will give Trump a bit of credit here, right? Let's just call a spade a spade. With respect to primary nominations, his record was actually pretty good, right? So basically, Trump is really, really good. He's very effective at hyping up the base, right? At getting Republicans to turn out for primaries. So when it was Republican candidate versus Republican candidate, the Trump-backed candidate tended to win the primaries. Voters tended to support, in the primaries, whoever Trump backed. And we saw, according to this Washington Post article, it's 224 out of 241 primary races. So House races, Senate races, governor's races, and statewide offices this past election cycle. 224 out of 241 Trump-backed candidate won, which is pretty damn good. But what's really interesting is when you start looking at the battleground state results. So these are states where it was actually hotly contested, maybe not necessarily a coin flip, but where Democrats also stood a good chance of winning the general election. This is where the key result is in, right? So in primary elections, again, Trump had an advantage, Trump-backed candidates had an advantage, and in many instances, Trump candidates were incumbents, right? So they already held the particular office and they were running for re-election. So these two things kind of inflated Trump's win-loss record for the midterms, right? Because incumbents generally have a colossal advantage, except for Trump, right? Because he had the incumbency advantage in 2020 and still lost anyway. But all things being equal, incumbents tend to win re-election. But in battleground states where that wasn't the case, Trump didn't do so hot. So Ballotpedia also broke out key battleground races for 2022, contests that weren't simply Trump rubber stamping the likely Republican winner. In those, they estimate, Trump's candidates won only 14 of 37 general election contests, which includes Dr. Oz's loss to John Fetterman in Pennsylvania. That's huge, right? As actually the most damning thing comes at the end of the article. Had close contests in 2022 actually come down to a coin toss, right? So 50-50, Ballotpedia's data suggests that the GOP would have done better than they did with Trump's endorsement, so that a coin flip would have been better for the GOP to follow. than Trump's recommendations in terms of battleground state elections this past midterm. Now, that's very interesting, right? Because this, many are interpreting, could be the death knell of Trump's grip on the GOP. Now, a lot can happen in between now and 2024. It's 2 years, right? And so I guess it's too early, rather, to be counting this with any degree of certainty. But right now, it seems like we're seeing a turning point in terms of Trump's popularity. Some polls even suggest that Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida is a preferred candidate, whereas prior to the election, he was seen as just a distant second to Trump. So it will be interesting to see moving forward how voters react, especially when you consider that the Justice Department, under Attorney General Merrick Garland, has appointed a special prosecutor to investigate President Trump with respect to the stolen documents, the classified documents that were found at Mar-a-Lago, which he was not legally allowed to have, classified or not. They belonged to the National Archives. He was obligated to return them to the National Archives. They made repeated requests for those documents to be returned to the National Archives, and he refused. That's illegal. And then the second thing that the Attorney General Special Counsel is looking at is Trump's involvement with January 6th and the refusal to commit to a peaceful transfer of power. So it's a two-pronged investigation that's not going to look good for Donald Trump, at least on paper. So it'll be interesting to see how, moving forward, that will affect Trump's popularity. During the House of Representatives Select Committee, looking into January 6th, it really didn't waffle all that much. We saw a bit of a downturn in terms of Trump's popularity with the GOP, but nothing seismic. Nothing that we would really need to see for his hold on the GOP to be shattered. But if Republican establishment figures are able to spin this as Trump for the second midterm in a row cost us an election, that might be enough to swing voters away from him. That might be enough to get the general electorate on the Republican Party to say, enough's enough with Donald Trump. We need to put some distance between us and him. So here's hoping. Hey, you. Yeah, you. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, and I hope that you did, please be sure to hit the like and subscribe. Also, my link tree is in the description below, so if you have a sec, go ahead and share the love on all my social media accounts. Also, if you want to express an opinion, eternal devotion, or undying contempt, go ahead and leave a comment, because we're always looking for feedback. And on that note, I look forward to pondering politics and pop culture again with you very soon.